Welcome to How We Met. I'm Sheryl Strich, and every month I get to meet with two couples from Laguna Woods who tell their story about how they met. Today we'll start off with Stuart and Marty Hack. Marty and Stuart are ardent supporters of the State of Israel, primarily through the Jewish National Fund. Stuart is a golfer. He's also chairman of the Reformed Temple's Endowment Fund and the Temple's VP of Fundraising. He's an advisor on Third Mutual's Residential Policy and Compliance Committee, and he's on the Garden Villa Rec Room Subcommittee. He's also involved in Al-Anon. Further, his ceramic sculptures have been featured in a gallery in Laguna Beach. Now, Marty, although she says that she just sits around and eats bonbons, she's currently the president of the Reformed Temple and plays a mean game of mahjong. Welcome. Did I get everything in?
Actually, Stuart is the president of the Garden Villa Association. 81 three-story buildings, approximately 2,000.
Well, you left that out when I asked you about information, but thank you.
We thought that was obvious.
Yes.
Anyway, thank you for coming on, and let's get started. My first question is, where are you from? And I think you're both from different places, so Stuart, why don't you start?
Born and raised in Baltimore, Maryland, and lived in Florida for 7 years, and then came out here in 2000.
And Marty?
Born in St. Louis, lived in New York, then Baltimore, which is where we eventually met in a small shtetl.
Whoa, ho, 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 ho.
Okay.
We'll get to that. Okay.
So Baltimore. I call Baltimore home.
Okay. How long have you guys been a couple?
16 years, 17 years this July, yeah.
Great. And how long have you been in Laguna Woods?
Okay, I moved here in 2002, and Marty and I were married in 2007, and that's when she moved. She informed me that I was geographically desirable.
Okay. All right, let's get started. How did you meet?
We lived in a small community in Baltimore, northwest Baltimore, and it was a neighborhood that was heavily wooded, so you never saw your neighbors. And the first winter that we were there were only 8 families, and we had a horrible snows, and we all kind of bonded. And Stuart lived down the hill.
Marty has always lived up the hill.
Yes, and he was down. And we met in that neighborhood with different spouses.
Oh, with different spouses.
Yes.
Yeah. We raised our children in that neighborhood.
Yeah, and my oldest daughter used to babysit for his girls.
So you raised your children simultaneously with different spouses?
Yes.
And then, okay, so that's how you met. And then how did you become a couple?
Well,
So I would go back to Baltimore every year to visit my mother, my sister, one of my daughters, and I always met up with mutual friends that we had. Our group would do New Year's Eve together, and for all the time we lived there. And so I would come back every year, and one year I'm meeting with mutual friends, and they say, "You should know that Marty is divorced." And I said, "No."
and he had been divorced at this point.
Yeah, and we talked and ate, and then they said, "Did you know that Marty lives in such and such a place?" And I said,
so you had moved out
"No."
of the neighborhood?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. They just kept feeding me tidbits, the hook, you know. And finally, I say, "You want to give me her phone number?" And there was silence, and I thought, this is strange, but it was really the hook sinking in even deeper. I had to practically beg for a phone number.
Did you know Stuart was coming to town?
No, I had no idea, but I had been divorced about maybe 5-6 years and was traveling a lot with the hotel business. But one Saturday night I'm sitting at home by myself and saying, "Okay, God, why am I sitting here by myself? And I didn't want to go to bars to pick up men, and I traveled a lot. I was in hotels, so long story short, I wrote about 6 pages of, okay, God, if there's somebody out there for me, this is what I'm looking for. And I did everything from he had to be artistic, a good businessman, a man of character. Oh, and by the way, by this point I had converted to Judaism. He's got to be Jewish. And now I'm 50-some years old, and this shrinks your applicant pool down to like this. So then, okay, there it is. God, it's your problem, not mine. Close the book, put it in the drawer, and forgot about it. And about
2 years later?
2 years later, Stuart came into
The phone
mind.
rings.
The phone rings.
So had you been in touch with these neighbors?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so they knew,
They knew both of us, and
had they tried setting you up before?
No.
Oh.
No one ever. I never dated while I was single. Never. No.
Okay. And so the phone rang.
And it was Stuart. And it was like homecoming. It was two old friends, you know, and we hadn't seen each other in 30 years.
Oh, in 30 years.
And 30 years had not seen each other.
How did that happen?
Well, he
well,
moved
we
out.
had no reason to
He moved out of the neighborhood, you know, to Florida and then to California.
okay.
And I stayed in Baltimore. And it was, you sit down and you talk about what's happened in your life over 30 years.
So I asked her out to dinner, and I show up at her apartment, and she had sushi and wine. And we never got to go to dinner.
But nothing happened.
We just talked.
Talked.
We just talked and talked. I canceled the reservation.
Where were you going to go?
I don't remember. But we did ultimately go out for dessert.
Okay.
Yeah. And then,
Double T Diner.
is that where we were?
I think so, yeah.
But then the way the relationship continued, I was traveling for hotels, and I was out, part of my territory was the West Coast, and I was here every 2 to 3 months on business from Baltimore, and we would see each other every 2 or 3 months, and it was a long distance relationship for about 2 years.
For 2 years, okay.
But I did introduce Marty to my family, and my mother said to me, "Don't you mess this up."
How sweet.
She didn't know me at the time. I mean, no, I did know them. I mean, I knew the family. Baltimore's kind of small.
Right,
Yeah.
right. I think I've been to the Double T Diner. by
Oh,
the way.
really?
I have a friend from Catonsville, so I.
Oh my God! Then
yeah.
you know Baltimore.
Yeah, I know Baltimore.
Okay.
So your kids grew up together
Well, in the same neighborhood.
in the same neighborhood,
Yeah,
different
they-
ages.
Yeah, different
Yes.
ages.
Okay.
And then Stuart's wife moved down to Severna Park.
Okay.
Okay, down towards Annapolis.
Okay.
So,
So the kids didn't really know each
Yeah.
other. Okay.
They knew who each other was.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Do you ever have big family gatherings?
We've tried.
we have, when you have grandchildren that are pushing teens, it's very difficult
Yeah.
to
Oh,
get.
even before that, because
Yeah.
they all have after-school activities.
Right.
It's been impossible to get them all together.
Right.
Yeah.
We've tried. We felt guilty about not succeeding, and then we gave up.
Yeah, just, until the kids get settled.
Right.
you know.
Right. Okay. Wow. Stories I didn't know, and I've
Yeah.
known you guys. Okay. So then you moved here. How soon did you start getting involved with stuff in Laguna Woods?
Pretty immediately. I was still working, but I joined the Art Association. I became vice president of the foundation, in charge of fundraising, and of course now pickleball
Yeah.
and golf, etc.
Sorry, I forgot about pickleball.
Yeah. Yes. But here, you can sit in your apartment and do nothing, or you can
Right.
go out and
Right.
enjoy life.
Right. And Stuart, you got involved right away in everything, huh?
No.
Oh.
So I came here fresh from a divorce, licking my wounds. I had no intention of staying here. I was much too young for all these old people. And
Wait, excuse me. Let me go back a minute. So you had just gotten divorced from Florida.
Well, I moved out here from Florida
Okay.
with my wife at the time. She
Okay.
had family out here.
Oh, okay.
And within 2 years, we were
Okay.
divorced. Moved
Okay.
out in 2002, we were divorced. And I rented an apartment here just to get back in,
Right.
get myself back together again.
Right, right.
And I had no intention of staying here. In fact, when Marty and I got married, and she moved out here, we had no intention of staying here. We were going to go buy a house someplace else.
Okay.
And we found a wonderful place, except that the cost of that house was double what it cost to buy a place here.
Right.
But then,
And we made friends. You made friends.
yeah, we at this point, I was like very involved in the temple.
Right.
And you say, we can't leave.
Right.
All our friends are here.
Right. Right.
But I did not want to get involved here. I did not get the newspaper. I did not want to hear about any of the problems. And I was much happier. But when we got married, I guess we lived in that apartment for a year or two,
Yeah.
and then we bought a 3-bedroom garden villa
Okay.
place. And when we moved into that building, there was a couple living with their mother, one of the mothers, and they said that they were there for 2 years, and he was the building captain.
Okay.
And he said, "You're the youngest person in the building. When I leave, you're the building captain." And that's how I got involved.
We have issues saying no.
Yeah. Well, I think we both came to the conclusion, if we had not been through a lot of drama in our lives and recovered from it, I don't think we would have really connected.
I think I came here fresh from a divorce. And what I see for myself, how healing Laguna Woods has been for me, and I assume I'm getting
Yes.
that it's extremely healing for you. It's amazing what this place can do for you.
Oh, it is a bit of paradise.
Yes, yes, it really is. Hey, even though you're not president and Marty is, I know how active you are in the temple. And I've heard, Bertie told me, that you are now putting on a concert on top of everything else.
June 30th, it's the temple's main fundraiser for the year.
Right.
Our year ends June 30. We couldn't fit it in any. Well, you know what it is
Right,
to
right.
to
It's
rent
impossible.
rooms out
It's
here and
impossible,
figure things
right.
out. Yeah, so we got it in June 30. So Bert Baum, who is a member of our temple, is paying for the entertainment. He made us an annual gift to the temple in order to have a musical event in memory of his wife who passed away a couple of years ago, who was Fran.
What kind of music is it?
Okay, so we are actually paying tribute to Debbie Friedman,
Ah, okay.
and who lived here with her mother, her aunt, and her sister. And for those who are not familiar, Debbie Friedman was
A world-famous icon in
Yes.
Jewish
icon classic,
music.
yeah, yeah. Creating the opportunity for people to find their way into Judaism in a musically.
And a very positive
But-
musical
yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Like
I
camp
think
music.
I think this is going to be great, and I know I'm going to be at the concert. Anyway, I got the 2-minute warning 2 minutes ago. I want to thank you guys
Thank
for
you.
coming on. This has really been fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Cheryl.
Thank you.
Our next couple are Alan and Debbie Tsubota. They're members of many Laguna Woods clubs, the Mac Club, the Chicago Club, the Hearing Club, and the Video Club. Plus, Alan swims and plays both golf and pickleball. However, their major focus is with Saddleback Church, where they're involved with small groups, food distribution, and Sunday services. Alan pulls the trailer for Sunday services and is part of the music ministry. I've heard that he plays a mean set of drums. And Debbie volunteers with the women's ministries on hospitality and teaching events. Hey, Debbie and Alan, I want to thank you for coming on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I I usually start with 3 questions. And the first question is, where are you from?
Well, I'm from Fresno. Lived there for as long as I remember. Went to high school there and junior high, elementary, college. Went to Fresno Pacific, and so basically lived in Fresno my
Just
entire
can't get
life.
away from Fresno. And Debbie, where are you from?
I was born in Chicago and then lived in the area, in the Chicago area, until I was 18. And my parents had moved to California, so I moved to California to go to college.
What college did you go to?
Fresno State and then Fresno
Fresno.
Pacific.
Okay.
Yeah, the connection.
All right. How long have you guys been a couple?
This year we will be celebrating our 42nd anniversary.
And how long did you know each other before that?
About a year and a half.
Okay, so 43 and a half years. And how long have you been in Laguna Woods?
Since 2018.
2018, so just 2 years before the shutdown.
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's get to business. How'd you meet?
Well, in the 1980s, I was finishing my student teaching assignment, and teaching positions were not very plentiful. But the master teacher I had went to the principal. I didn't know about this, but she asked him if he would hire me. And he said that he would, except he doesn't have any positions. So she said, if she resigns her position, would he hire me to take her slot? And he said that he would. And so she resigned and gave me her teaching assignment. And so that's how I got started.
Wow.
And then a little bit later, the principal called me into the office. It was a Wednesday, I remember this. And he asked me if I would be willing to take a student teacher. And I said, you know, I really don't think it would be a good idea because it's my first year teaching. And he said, well, you had Jane. She's the best. You'll be fine. Plus, the university is putting pressure on me to place these students. So I said, well, for you, I would, because I really liked the principal.
What were you teaching?
I was a special ed teacher.
Okay.
And he says, you know, who knows? You might have this pretty young gal fall in love, get married, and live happily ever after. And so after he said that, we both started laughing. Thought it was really funny. So he shares the story with other teachers on staff, and I'm sharing with other people our conversation, and that's kind of what happened there.
So when it came time for me to need a supervising teacher for special ed that same year, first of all, our last name is Japanese,
Yes.
and it's got the TS, and people look at that and have a lot of trouble pronouncing Suboda. So they were mangling it. I had no idea how to say his last name. So I show up to the meeting, the orientation, where you meet your supervising teacher, and I said, oh, is Mr. Swoboda, you know, is he here now? And there was a lady and a gentleman sitting at, well, a very young gentleman sitting at a table. And they look at each other and they go, yeah, he's here somewhere. And I go in and they do everything. Well, then when I get matched up with Mr. Swoboda, it was him. They had kind of teased me a little bit.
And so while this is happening, the other teachers are kicking me under the table.
But then he was my supervising teacher for that part of my student teaching. And we didn't date
This
right
was in
away.
Fresno. This was in
still
Fresno.
well, it was in
In
Clovis.
Clovis.
Okay, Clovis.
Just
That's
by
near Fresno.
yeah.
Okay.
And at the end of the school year, there was a staff party. And so he invited me to go with him. And I remember walking into the staff party with him, and all the teachers are like, whoa, and staring like, whoa, they really are here together. It was funny.
Had you been a couple before that?
No.
Oh, so that was where you took her on the first date?
Kind of.
Yes.
We were friends. We did some things together before that. But that was the beginning of
That was
the
the beginning.
relationship.
How sweet. And then what happened after that?
We lived happily ever after.
So
Well, I got a position I interviewed to go to grad school. I mean, I was going to go to grad school at Cal Poly. And then there's this little town out in the middle of the desert, right at the end of Death Valley. And the lady in one of the offices said, why don't you interview with them just to get practice interviewing?
And Alan was at the school in Fresno.
He was
teaching
working in
school.
Fresno
Okay.
at this time. So I interviewed, and the gentleman was very persuasive and convinced me to work a year and then go to grad school. And so
To work in the desert.
to work out in the desert.
Okay.
So we spent a year apart, and this is when we got engaged, while I was in the desert and he was in Fresno. And that was an interesting way to really start a relationship.
So is the
long
climate in
distance.
the desert much different than the climate in Fresno?
Well, yes, it's
Okay.
extremely hot in the summer, 125
Oh.
in the shade,
Okay.
and extremely cold in the winter, be in the teens.
Okay. Sorry, I
And-
didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
okay,
no.
so you were working in the desert for a year.
And he would come down and visit on weekends, things like that. And the principal there really liked him, and she was going to move on to another position. And so they hired him as a special ed teacher. So he came to the desert.
Oh.
I will say the incentive there is that they paid a lot more money
Okay.
to get people out in the desert. So we were going to live there 5 years.
We said we could live just about anywhere for 5 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, just about anywhere. But we ended up developing a community there, getting involved in a church. Our children ended up having our children, and it was, it was kind of nice raising our kids in a small town. They could play they could play football in the street. They could go out in the desert in quads, and so it was kind of a nice place to raise.
What was the name of the town?
It's Trona.
Oh, Trona.
But it's right outside of Ridgecrest. There's China Lake Naval Base.
Okay, so
is
it's
over
on the
there.
way to Mammoth.
Yes,
mean, you see
east
it,
of there.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, how many years were you there?
We were there 35 years.
Okay, and then you started, what were you teaching, Debbie?
I was teaching first grade, then kindergarten.
Okay, and you were teaching special ed.
Right.
And then what happened?
And then the principal asked if I would be the administrator on site when she had to leave because I had 2 paraprofessionals and could leave my classroom. And so
Okay.
I said, sure.
Okay.
And later she asked me if I would consider applying for principal. And I said, well, no, I'm really not interested. And she said, well, just find out from the university how close you are and submit your name as an applicant and just kind of go through it as if it's practice.
Why is the university involved?
Because it's a different credential.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I checked with the university. They said if I really wanted to work during the summer, and they could have me finished in the summer. So I decided to do that. I went through the interview process, and during the middle of the interview, I kind of stopped, and the board president who was there asked me if there was a problem. I said, well, yes, I'm afraid you guys are going to hire me. And she said, well, would that be a problem? And I said, well, I'm just doing this for practice. I'm really not interested. She goes, well, why don't you just do it for a year, see if you like it, and then decide.
Right.
So I did that for 34 years.
He was the youngest principal they'd ever had. He was only 29.
So so you must have been,
28.
you taught for like 3 years.
I taught in Trona
Right.
for a year and a half,
And how long did you teach in Fresno?
2 years.
2 years. So so you hadn't taught very long
No.
to become a principal. Wow. And this was in elementary school?
Correct.
Okay,
Was.
perfect.
And so he was my boss.
Usually it's the other way around. Usually you move to the guy's place,
Right.
place of work, and instead
Yes.
you came to Debbie's. How sweet.
Yes. And it was nice because because it was a small town and cost of living was low, I was able to stay home and get involved with the church for the time that our children were growing up, which is what I wanted.
So you were able to drop out of teaching?
Yes.
Ah,
I
okay.
substituted, and then I worked at the church had a small private school, and I worked there some, but it was nice that we could do that.
Perfect. And I understand how many you have two sons, right?
We
Two
have
sons.
2 boys.
2 boys, and how many grandkids?
2, well, 3, but we just haven't met one yet. He'll be born in July.
Oh, well, congratulations.
But we're looking forward to meeting him too.
You know, I have 2 new grandsons too, so it's
Yes.
really a sweet time.
It is, isn't it? It's like you have this place in your heart that you didn't know you had,
Right,
and God opens
right,
it up when you have your
right.
grandkids.
How can you love so much? You didn't even realize you had that, right? I know,
It's great.
right? Well, anyway, wow, that's a cute story. I like that story.
Thanks.
You followed her and got the job. The good job. Anyway, I just got the 2-minute warning, so I want to thank you guys for coming on. It's really, I'm really happy that you were here, and it's fun to have you here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you'd like to come on to the show, email us at lwvcouples@gmail.com. Include your name, phone number, and email address, and brief description of your story.